Steelers Nation, Mike Tomlin has one major flaw that is holding back and has been holding back the Pittsburgh Steelers for many years at this point. And I've given Coach Tomlin a lot of time to figure out this issue. I've given him a lot of time to kind of come to his senses when it comes to this major flaw in his game. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to do that yet. And until he does, and if he does, I think that this team can potentially get back into playoff and even Super Bowl, contender kind of status. But it's been almost a half decade now, and this issue has been very prevalent inside the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. And it all starts at the top. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Kick us off down there in the comment section before we talk about Coach T on today's show. How would you rate Mike Tomlin as an NFL head coach? On a scale of 1, meaning he's the worst coach in professional football, to 10, meaning he's the absolute best. How would you rank the Steelers head coach at this point in his coaching tenure? Now, before I get into the biggest flaw with Mike Tomlin and why it's so frustrating for me, I want to make abundantly clear that Coach T doesn't just have one flaw. He does have multiple flaws that have been prevalent in his coaching profile for multiple years at this point, namely poor game management. He doesn't use challenges correctly. He doesn't go for it on fourth down as much as you would want a modern-day NFL head coach to go for it. He uses timeouts poorly at the end of halves usually. He's not the best game manager in the world, despite the fact that he's the longest tenured head coach in American professional sports right now. You'd think that much experience would lead to better game management. Fortunately, that hasn't been the case with Mike Tomlin. Then also his team-building philosophy is defense first. He's a defensive-minded head coach, and he has spent a lot of money on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, over the last half decade plus, the Pittsburgh Steelers have had the most expensive defense in the National Football League, and they haven't been the best defense in the league during that time. They've been, good, but they haven't been elite or great during that time. And if you're going to spend that much money on defense, you would want, this unit to be elite consistently, and they're not. Also, he wasted the Killer B era with Big Ben Roethlisberger, with Le'Veon Bell, with Antonio Brown. That team was more than capable of winning Super Bowls for multiple years, and unfortunately, they were not able to get the job done, never even made the Super Bowl. The furthest they went was the AFC Championship. Then also just the general lack of playoff success that this team has had under Mike Tomlin's tenure, especially since the last time they made it to the Super Bowl and they lost to Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers all those years back. Tomlin, in his career, has a sub 50% playoff win percentage, currently a record of 8-11. And then over the last 8 years, this is almost a full decade here, guys, he's 0-5, all right? So it's not been, pretty once this team does eventually make it to the postseason. There's a reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers are the poster child in the NFL right now for being mediocre, being good, and being able to make the playoffs, but eventually just losing to better quality teams that have higher ceilings than the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And, if I have to give Coach T a comparison, a comp to somebody in professional sports right now, I'd have to say Doc Rivers of the National Basketball Association, currently the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, these two, Doc Rivers and Mike Tomlin, both have a championship, just one, and they were within a 12-month span of each other. Of course, Doc won his in Boston in 2008, and then Tomlin won his with the Steelers during the 2008-2009 season. So it's kind of crazy how similar their career trajectories of head coaches have come down. They're both known as player coaches with high floors, but they rarely get it done in the postseason. And, certainly, if you have that long of a track record of that being your profile, maybe it's something to do with you. But with that said, I do fully acknowledge Mike Tomlin's strengths as a head coach as well, which is why, I am willing to give Mike Tomlin the rest of this year to figure things out, and, why I've been mostly complimentary of Mike Tomlin throughout his head coaching career here in Pittsburgh. I do think he is a world-class motivator, and he runs a really tight ship, all right? There's a reason why the floor is set so high here in Pittsburgh and why you're consistently getting over 500 records and consistently getting 10-plus win records. It's because, things don't leak, and Mike Tomlin runs a very good organization, and his players play very hard for him even when things kind of get tough. I also think his focus is in the right place. He doesn't give a shit what anybody says about him. He's focused on the task at hand. He's very hyper-focused, which you need to be as an NFL head coach. He's not worried about outside noise, which is something I appreciate about Mike Tomlin. Also, players are attracted to him. Aaron Rodgers would not be in Pittsburgh right now if it weren't for Mike Tomlin. And there's certain players that certainly decide to come to Pittsburgh despite their lack of, maybe good, team facilities and, cold weather and all that stuff. They come to Pittsburgh because they want to play for a guy like Mike Tomlin, who's the ultimate player's coach. And then also right now among NFL history, among coaches with at least 100 games as a head coach, he currently has the highest win percentage in one-score games out of any head coach in NFL history. So the close game stuff, the mental toughness that his teams have traditionally had, it's better than any head coach in NFL history. So that is something worth mentioning as well. However, he does have one major flaw that I believe holds him back and holds this Steelers team back and has held this team back really for the last half decade plus at this point. And I'm not sure if Mike Tomlin's ever going to figure this flaw out as long as he's the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before I reveal what that flaw is, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And it's the holiday season, guys, and the best time of the year for sports is right now. Football's going on right now. Of course, basketball is heating up, and you got Christmas games coming up here soon. Bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes in football, both collegiately and professionally. It's all happening all at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every single day, what gifts to buy, what to eat at Christmas dinner, what game to watch, there is one place where it feels good to be right, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least two-player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks is how you play is up to you. If I want a little bit more flexibility, I can choose the flex play where I can get paid even if one of my picks misses. And if I'm feeling really strong about my lineup and want the biggest payouts, I go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test and make some money. That is, if you know ball. And yesterday, Ponzi and I did make some money in our Prize Picks lineup for Week 12. We took the more on DJ Moore receiving yards, took the more on DK Metcalf receptions. We took the more on Jaylen Warren rushing yards. We were able to hit on all three of these, which means Ponzi and I walked away with a little bit of money from our friends at Prize Picks. And if you guys want to get in on the fun here for the rest of the football season, you guys can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So the biggest flaw that Mike Tomlin brings to the table when it comes to his head coaching tenure of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, in my opinion, is that he directs his offense, even though he's a defensive-minded head coach, he directs his offensive play callers, his quarterbacks, his entire offense to avoid the intermediate and deep middles of the field when passing the football. And guys, I thought maybe it was just a specific play caller or maybe it was a specific quarterback, but it doesn't matter if it's Matt Canada. It doesn't matter if it's Eddie Faulkner. It doesn't matter if it's Arthur Smith. You guys can take a look at some of these passing charts throughout the year. Kenny Pickett not throwing the ball over the middle of the field. Justin Fields avoiding the middle of the field under Arthur Smith, right? Russell Wilson avoiding the middle of the field. Okay, this is a pattern. And then even this season, Aaron Rodgers, you guys can take a look at this one from earlier this season against Cleveland, avoiding the middle of the field for the most part there. And then just last week, just yesterday with Mason Rudolph, not throwing the ball over the intermediate and deep middle portions of the field at all. And this has just been a very consistent theme when it comes to Mike Tomlin, especially over the last 5+ years, is that this team does not throw the ball over the middle of the field. And the problem with that, guys, is that it severely limits the upside of the Steelers' passing game, all right? It kind of limits where the Steelers want to throw the ball, and defenses really know where the Steelers want to attack, and they can hone in on those areas, making windows tighter and making things more difficult for the Steelers to move the ball down the field and create explosive plays in the passing game. And the reason why Mike Tomlin does this, the reason why he directs his offense directly to not throw the ball over the middle of the field is because statistically that is where a large majority of interceptions are thrown. Guys overthrow passes over the middle of the field. It goes right to a safety, right? And, it's just tough because, you do want to win that turnover battle. But as Bruce Arians used to say, no risk it, no biscuit. And, the Steelers aren't getting any biscuits over the middle of the field. And the reason why you target the middle of the field, guys, is because it not only opens up the entire field, because if the defense has to consistently guard the middle of the field, and especially the deep portions of the middle of the field, then that really opens up the sidelines. That opens up everything underneath. That opens up your entire passing game, and it forces the defense to respect every blade of grass on the field. But if you just never throw to the middle of the field, defenses can really just hone in on the sidelines and underneath, and that's what we've been seeing from opposing defenses that have been able to shut down the Steelers' passing attack this year. But also throwing the ball over the middle of the field presents run-after-catch opportunities for wide receivers. You want to know why George Pickens is playing so well in Dallas this year? Well, they're running him a lot on in-breakers, and he's a fantastic run-after guy. And Pittsburgh never used him in that way, and that's part of the reason why George Pickens failed here in Pittsburgh is because this offense didn't take advantage of his incredible skill set. And guys, there is a reason why pretty much every single good offensive coordinator and play caller in this league targets the middle of the field. Look at what Ben Johnson did to this defense yesterday. I mean, a bunch of play-action plays over the middle completely killed the Steelers' defense because, the middle of the field is one of the more vulnerable areas for offenses to attack. And if you can very consistently attack the middle of the field, like I said, it opens up everything for your passing attack and makes your offense more explosive and makes it better. The best guys in the league, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Sean Payton, Ben Johnson, what do they all have in common? They attack the middle of the field. And the Pittsburgh Steelers just don't do that and haven't done that for many years at this point. And like I said earlier, guys, Bruce Arians, the last offensive coordinator here in Pittsburgh to win a Super Bowl, used to say, quote, "No risk it, no biscuit," all right? And that was back when, the Steelers would actually throw the ball down the field with Big Ben Roethlisberger. And, this is the only offensive coordinator Mike Tomlin has really had Super Bowl level success with was when Bruce Arians was here in Pittsburgh when they were playing a more no risk it, no biscuit style of offense. And now that Arians has left and Mike Tomlin has kind of been left to his own devices in terms of the guys that he's bringing in and all this different stuff, he's completely changed his philosophy to F the biscuit, why risk it? We're not going to try and throw turnovers. We're going to play safe. We're going to play scared, and we're not going to turn the football over, and we're going to try and depend on our defense to turn the football over to win football games. And the problem with that, guys, is that defensive turnover production is extremely volatile, and it's not something that you can consistently rely on if you want to be a Super Bowl caliber team. When defenses pretty much know that you completely avoid a middle of the field, and listen, man, if I can identify, and if multiple Steelers YouTubers and people on X and social media can identify that the Steelers never throw the ball over the middle of the field, you bet your sweet ass that these defensive coordinators that get paid millions of dollars to do this have also identified this, and you guys see it on Sundays. They take away the sidelines. They take away the underneath stuff, and it's just like pulling teeth to watch this Steelers offense play football because there's a whole area of the field that they're not throwing to, and even doesn't matter how much a defense leaves it wide open, the Steelers refuse to throw it there. And then you pair this really faulty offensive philosophy from a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Tomlin with poor roster construction that is not built to run that style of offense, okay? If you're going to run an offense that is going to mostly attack the sidelines and mostly attack underneath, okay, you need an offense that has primarily big-bodied, outside type of receivers that have great hands, that can make contested catches, that are good route runners so that they can get open on the limited route trees that they actually run, all right? But what'd they do? All right, they had the best ball winner on the sideline in the National Football League in George Pickens, probably the best 50-50 ball winner in the league on their football team, and they got rid of him. And they replaced him with somebody in DK Metcalf who, yes, is a big body. Theoretically, you would think a big body guy like DK Metcalf should be able to be an excellent 50-50 ball winner, but he's not. He never really has been, and his specialty is really run after the catch. His specialty is running away from people, not out-muscling people at the catch point. And, that's the way the Steelers want to use DK Metcalf, and it's been a major problem, and it has led to one of the worst seasons of DK Metcalf's career statistically. And then they paired DK Metcalf with a bunch bunch of smaller receivers that, are speedy and they're fast. And honestly, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, they can run some pretty good routes and they're very fast, but they don't run them over the middle of the field. So you're not going to throw up a 50-50 ball to Calvin Austin III or Roman Wilson. They're too small, right? So it just doesn't make sense, the way that this roster has been constructed at the wide receiver position with how Mike Tomlin wants the Steelers to play offense. And then also their best ball winner at tight end, they barely use him. All right, Pat Freiermuth, has less targets than Darnell Washington and Jonnu Smith this year. Like, Pat Freiermuth should be heavily featured as the top receiving weapon in the tight end room here in Pittsburgh, in my opinion. He's a zone killer, and he's got like the third most snaps at the tight end position on this team. It just doesn't make any sense with the way the Steelers want to play football on offense. And what all this has led to, a poor offensive philosophy mixed with poor roster construction for this style of offense. It's led to an offense that refuses to throw the ball over the middle of the field, and then they can't throw to the sideline because they don't have enough ball winners. So that's forced Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, these guys, and Arthur Smith as a play caller to rely so heavily on yak and short passing and quick game. And when that happens, man, defenses can just pin their ears back. They don't really have to defend deep because they know the Steelers aren't going deep, all right? Like, they just take away, and they try to take away the sidelines, and they try and take away the underneath stuff, and that's all they have to do. And, that's really sad because I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers actually have the ingredients here to be able to have a really successful passing offense this year. I really do, all right? And, you might scoff at that because of the lack of production from these guys, but I really chalk that up more to the way Mike Tomlin has, kind of set up this offense and the way he wants this offense to run, as opposed to a lack of true talent and ability here in Pittsburgh. I mean, Arthur Smith, before he came to Pittsburgh, loved throwing the ball over the middle. I mean, he was known for, getting A.J. Brown to superstar status because of the in-breaking routes that he would run in Tennessee. That was a big part of that offense that, Art helped lead to a number one seed in the AFC with Ryan Tannehill, of all people, at quarterback, all right? He kind of overswung his offensive production based on the talent he had in Atlanta. But now he's come to Pittsburgh, and Mike Tomlin pretty much tells him the same thing he told Matt Canada, which is, don't throw the ball over the middle of the field. We don't want to turn the football over. It just doesn't work. And then, Pittsburgh has 3 wide receivers on their team right now. They're starting 3 receivers, all run in the 4.3. So this is one of the fastest wide receiver rooms in the National Football League, and they refuse to use their speed. If you had this much speed, how would you want to use these guys? You would want to run them on post routes and on deep crossers and on digs and on slants and get the ball out in space to these players that can run really fast. But that's not what the Steelers do. The Steelers tell them to run straight forward, and maybe Aaron Rodgers will throw you a go ball. But it's like none of these guys are 50-50 ball winners down the sideline. So why are we running them that way? And how many times have you seen this offense throw a true post route to one of these receivers this year? Maybe once, maybe twice. Like, they just don't use these guys enough in space, whereas if they just attack the middle of the field, these guys, I think, would be a lot more productive, and this passing attack would be a lot more dangerous. In other words, guys, this offense and this wide receiver room is built for a completely different style of offense than Mike Tomlin wants to run here in Pittsburgh. This offense is built to run, a heavy in-breaker style of offense. Lots of digs, lots of shallow crosses, lots of slants, lots of post routes. But they don't run any of that stuff. They run a lot of out routes, and they run a lot of, curls, and they run a lot of streaks. And it's just in a lot of quick game, and it's just not what this offense is built to be at the wide receiver position. And I really think that this could be the missing piece. I'm talking about the vertical passing game. If they could attack the intermediate and deep middles of the field, I honestly think this Steelers team and this offense could be pretty darn good. Frankly, it would open up the yak stuff underneath. I mean, Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Warren, these guys are legitimately good yak pieces. Darnell Washington, really good yak guy as well. All that's true. But you don't want to rely on that. You want that to be good check down options instead of completely using them as a crutch the way that this Steelers offense has to at this point, because Mike Tomlin doesn't want to throw the ball over the middle of the field, and he doesn't want to turn the football over. I really doubt that Tomlin's going to change his philosophy at this point. We're now multiple offensive coordinators and multiple quarterbacks in at this point, and it hasn't changed. The one common denominator is the head coach, Mike Tomlin, who is driving the ship when it comes to the offensive philosophy, even though he's a defensive head coach. He should be giving full autonomy to Arthur Smith to run whatever the hell he wants. Instead, he's not doing that. He's kind of meddling in an area where he shouldn't be meddling in, frankly, and it's hurting this team, and it's holding this team back from reaching its potential of hopefully getting back to Super Bowl contention. And I really think, potentially the only way that this is going to change is if we find a new head coach that's willing to embrace an offensive philosophy that attacks the middle of the field and embraces creativity on the offensive side of the ball. I'm hoping, and I've been hoping, that Mike Tomlin can kind of come to this epiphany, and I'm hoping he comes to that epiphany towards the end of this season, because I think it would change things here in Pittsburgh. But, I mean, it's been 5+ years at this point with this philosophy with a bunch of different guys at OC. I just don't necessarily see Tomlin changing his ways at this point in time. And unfortunately, I kind of doubt that Art Rooney, the owner of this team, would actually fire him. I mean, Tomlin has a lot of money left on his contract heading into future years. And, of course, I think, the Rooney family and these guys are very proud of the fact that they haven't fired a head coach ever. I mean, they're very proud of the fact that they keep their head coaches until they retire. And maybe a trade is possible, but the thing about a trade with Mike Tomlin is that he would have to agree to go to the team that he's going to go to next. Like the New York Giants, would he really want to go and rebuild the Giants? I mean, he passed on Jackson Dart this past year in the draft with the Steelers. Does he really want him to be his new franchise quarterback? Like, he'd have to agree to go to any team, and all these teams that are firing coaches are probably heading towards rebuild. So I'm not sure how likely it is that Tomlin would accept a trade at least this season. But I think something that is probably the most possible, and if the Steelers are going to move off of Mike Tomlin, I think this is probably the most likely scenario, is that Tomlin agrees to quote-unquote step away from football for maybe a year or maybe even 2 years to search for his next opportunity. He'll be one of the hottest names on the head coaching market. And then when the time comes where he finds a team that he wants to go coach for, Pittsburgh trades him, and the Steelers can likely get a first-round pick in that trade, maybe even more than that. I mean, John Gruden was traded for a first-round pick. Sean Payton was traded for a first-round pick. And honestly, this would be pretty much the exact same way it went down with Sean Payton in New Orleans. Sean Payton decided to step away from football once it was pretty clear that the Saints were in cap hell and they were heading in the wrong direction as an organization. He took a year off. He did the media thing, and then he comes back, and, the Saints get a first-round pick from the Denver Broncos in exchange for him. So I kind of feel like if Mike Tomlin is going to step away from the Steelers this year, this is the way that it would go down. And honestly, this is a scenario, in my opinion, where everybody wins. All right, Pittsburgh gets a new head coach to kind of head start and kind of kickstart a new rebuild here in Pittsburgh. Draft a new quarterback, all that different stuff. Also, Pittsburgh doesn't have to fire him, so they can continue telling all their friends and their aristocrats that they never fire a head coach. Then also Mike gets to pick his next spot, right? He doesn't feel forced to go necessarily anywhere. He can handpick his spot. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have to pick up his contract, don't have to pay him the millions of dollars to fire him. And then also the Steelers get a nice haul of picks for him. I mean, I think at the very least they get at least one first-round draft pick for him because he is a future Hall of Fame head coach. And I think a lot of teams would really crave the stability that Mike Tomlin would bring to their organization. And, I'll kind of finish up today's video by saying this, guys. I'm always going to be, a Coach T fan. And I'm always going to be somebody that considers him a Steelers legend. If you win a Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm always going to hold you in high regard. I think Mike Tomlin, should be in the Steelers Hall of Fame one day for sure, whenever he leaves this organization. But I think, if he's doing stuff here that's holding this team back, I think it might be time for a new day in Pittsburgh, especially heading into an offseason where, you could potentially get a new franchise quarterback in an offseason where you got a bunch of draft picks. It's a really good setup for a new head coach to come in and, start a new era of Pittsburgh Steelers football. So, I'm going to be willing to give Mike Tomlin the rest of this season to figure it out. And, hey, if they win a playoff game and they find some consistency down the stretch, I'll be happy for Mike Tomlin to come back for another season. But at this time, if they don't make the playoffs, if they significantly show their inconsistencies down the stretch as they have this entire season, For me, my preferred option for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be to move on from Mike Tomlin and find a new head coach. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Does the Pittsburgh Steelers need a new head coach next season? Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. Now today, guys, I'm going to be watching the film from Steelers versus Bears. I'm going to be collecting my film takeaways, and I'm going to be reviewing those in our second video that comes out later this evening. So if you guys want the good, the bad, and the ugly on offense and defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers, after my film study, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and join us for our show later today. And that's going to be it for this morning's edition of Steelers Talk. I appreciate you guys bearing with me here with my little Mike Tomlin rant here after yet another frustrating loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. But I'm going to be here. I'm going to be rocking with the Pittsburgh Steelers the rest of this season. I hope you guys will as well. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.